It is, and you're absolutely right. And we're all going to become experts, those of us who are going to cover the story, in concrete and the tensile strength and all those sorts of things that are related to it. So there, more. Look, it's, as you said, it's the very early stages of the investigation in terms of what happened. It's probably going to be months and months before Miami-Dade Police Department, the Miami-Dade Homicide Unit, as you noted, is taking the lead. They will bring in technical engineers who will assist them in understanding exactly why this building failed. You know, David Begnow had a very good report just a moment ago. While there was some work being done on the roof, by and large, the people I've spoken to, both on the scene and around it and related to it, say that whatever failed from underneath this building. And so, yes, the attorney for the condo association who you interviewed just a few moments ago in David's piece told me as well that when representatives of the building went in after the collapse and were in the garage area, they could see a large hole had formed underneath the garage, which again suggests that you have saltwater intrusion potentially. To your point, is this expected? Is this understood? Is this something that could happen to other buildings? In Miami-Dade County, they require a 40-year recertification of buildings. This building was built in 1981. So here in 2021, they were in the midst of that 40-year recertification process. And what that means is they've had inspectors throughout that building for the last few months. They had identified certain repairs that were needed, and that contractors were in the process of being hired to make those repairs. I asked the attorney for the association if any of the repairs that have been identified were significant enough to have caused this damage, and he said no. But as you know, if you think about it in terms of once you begin repairs on a structure, you often find more and more issues. And I think that what you were referring to with regard to the pilings that go in, that the building is based on, yes, that is something that they are going to be looking closely to, because let's remember Miami Beach and Surfside, it's a sandbar, it's built on marshland. It was not supposed to really have structures on it, and yet man decided that this is where hotels and everyone wanted to stay because they could be on the beach. And so the attorney in my conversation with them wondered if this is not a harbinger of concern for other potential failures, and whether or not communities such as these that we see on the beach need closer inspections, maybe more often than 40 years. So I think saltwater intrusion is going to play a major role. Saltwater gets into the concrete. 40-year-old concrete is more porous than concrete they use today. That's what I've come to learn. And that salt water gets into the concrete, dries out. The salt then eats away at the rebar and the metal structure within the concrete. That weakens, and that could have been one of the reasons. Again, very early, but we're going to learn a lot more about how these buildings are built, and more importantly, what lessons to take from this disaster going forward. Well, the fact that the President of the United States signed an emergency declaration for what is ultimately a local event is quite sobering. This is not something that's typical. I talked to one emergency manager who likened it to Oklahoma City and the World Trade Center in terms of the scope and scale of this. And what the FEMA declaration is able to do, and the Federal Emergency Declaration, is it brings additional resources. Look, Miami-Dade is very fortunate in the sense that they have right here in South Florida at least 3 of the elite urban search and rescue teams that are often brought in. If this incident had occurred, for instance, in Haiti, the urban search and rescue team from Miami would have been the ones loaded up on C-130s and flown to Haiti or to Mexico or to wherever in Latin America. That's what they typically do. So the fact that they could be here means that we've got the very best teams available. So they have that part covered. But there is going to be a lot to deal with. In terms of expense, that structure is going to eventually have to all be torn down. All of the possessions that those people have in those buildings are all lost and gone. There's going to be need for costs for funerals, for all sorts of things. So in a way, what this does is it also opens up the federal checkbook and the state to be able to help provide a backstop. There are things that the local officials need in terms of support for additional crews to come in for relief efforts. But really what it does is it signifies the significance of just how bad the situation is. And with 159 people unaccounted for, it's a sobering and jarring number that I'm told caught the president's attention and why he made the declaration he did. While we are still very much in the recovery or the rescue aspect of it, they are trying to still work under the assumption that there may be people trapped in some sort of crevices that they may be able to try to find. Every source of mine that I've spoken to at the site tells me that they are bracing and the community should be braced for something significant in terms of the numbers rising. I think, quite honestly, we need to start rethinking about this accident, not in the sense of a typical sort of collapse of a structure, but more almost like an airplane crash, that like a 747 crashing into the ground in terms of the number of lives that are likely to be lost. And so I think when you start thinking of it in those terms, you realize the scope of it. And one sign of that is that at the Family Reunification Center, one of the things that they're doing with the FBI's assistance is they're taking DNA samples from families, because they know that once they start recovering the remains, that it's going to be hard to identify. And it also, I've spoken to officials with the medical examiner's office, they are bracing for a very long haul, like days and days of bodies coming out of there and having to be identified. Matter of fact, one source told me recently that they're getting ready to bring in, portable medical examiner units and refrigerator trucks to the scene probably later today or tomorrow. Bullet items out of that was that the death toll has now climbed to 4. They recovered 3 bodies overnight. But more importantly, the number of unaccounted for rose from 99 to 159, a fairly dramatic leap. When I inquired separately as to why that number had risen so sharply, it's that they are just now beginning to fully understand who was in the building, because families are now coming forward and saying, my grandmother was there, my sister was there, and they're starting to be able to compile a more fuller list, because there was no real master list of who was staying inside that building on Wednesday night. So now they have a better idea, and with 159 individuals missing, the chances of recovery of some of those folks is growing more and more dim.